Okay, these last two arguments we're going to look at are very different from the types of arguments that we've been looking at. The logic of these arguments and the strategy of these arguments is very different than the other arguments we've been looking at. And the first one we'll look at is Pascal's wager. It's the second one in your thought primer, or second to the last one that you had to evaluate in your thought primer. So Pascal's laying out an argument that's like a bet. He's saying, where do you want to put your money? On God existing or God not existing, okay? So let's see how Pascal's argument unfolds here. So first premise, God either exists or he does not exist. So there's a tautology. That has to be true. Either there's a God in reality that exists or there's not. Can't be both, can't be neither. So first premise, right out of the gate, we've got a tautology, has to be true. Second premise says this, if God exists, then we're his creation and are responsible for living in accordance with his plan. So by the definition of God that our monotheists are operating from, yes, this is true. If this God exists, then we are a part of this creation and we're responsible for fulfilling our purpose in that design, in that creation, living in accordance with it. If God exists and we live rightly, that is in accordance with the plan and in harmony with natural law, then we'll reap the great reward of eternal life. In other words, it'll suck because we're going to have to give up some things that we might otherwise want to do because we don't want to lose out on this possibility of the reward of eternal life. But we will if we make those kinds of sacrifices and live according to this plan and don't do the things that God tells us not to do and do the things that God does tell us to do, then we have this great reward potential at the end of eternal life. But if God does not exist, we'd be completely free and autonomous and can live according to our own desires, since the only rewards are the rewards we receive on earth, okay? So if God doesn't exist, there's a lot of freedom we suddenly get. We can do anything because the only punishments that exist would be the punishments that people choose to give us here on earth. And there's plenty of things that may be immoral to do or maybe against what's claimed to be God's plan. There's plenty of those things that we could do without suffering any consequences here. So if God doesn't exist, then that promise of the eternal reward is no longer there. We're free to enjoy some things that we might not otherwise enjoy while we're here on earth, for sure. Choosing to believe in God risks the loss of that complete freedom and exchanges it for the possibility of eternal life, okay? So we give up. Choosing to believe in God means, okay, I'm not going to do some of these things that God tells me are sins, or God tells me are things I shouldn't do, but it's for the sake of this eternal life possibility. On the other hand, choosing not to believe in God risks the loss of eternal life for the benefits of finite earthly rewards. Yeah, if I do things that God doesn't like and it turns out if I choose to not believe in God and God actually exists, and my choosing to believe God doesn't exist allows me to do things that God doesn't want me to do, I might be screwed if God exists. So Pascal concludes it's smarter to risk the small sacrifice of loss of total autonomy for the possibility of eternal life than to risk the loss of eternal life for the benefit of finite earthly rewards. So here's the gamble. You got two options to pick. You choose to believe that God exists and give up some of your desires for the sake of the possibility of eternal life, or do you put it on, the red square, the pot that God doesn't exist, and now you're free to do whatever you want because there's no eternal reward that you're going to lose out on. Pascal says the smart choice is believe in God. Now, can you spot what makes this argument different from all of the others? Did you say that this argument doesn't actually argue that God exists? Right? All of the other arguments were arguments for the existence of God. They were giving you either a reasoning that led to the logical necessity of a God existing, or they were providing you evidence that seemed to indicate it would be reasonable to conclude that God exists. What Pascal's doing here is saying, look, you got to make a choice, either believe or not believe. And whether you believe or not believe is going to have certain downsides to it. They both have downsides, but the safer bet is believe in God, because you might get an eternal reward, okay? So this isn't an argument that God exists. This is an argument about what you should believe. And I've highlighted the conclusion here in red because Pascal's way of thinking about believing seems kind of off. Can you just choose to believe something? Like, can I choose to believe there's a unicorn in my backyard right now? Like, could I choose that? It doesn't seem like believing happens by choice. It seems like we become convinced of something because we see that it's true. Okay? So Pascal's argument is nice for somebody who already believes. But what if you don't? Can you just choose to believe? Is belief something you can turn on and off like that?